The air hung heavy with the scent of old books and forgotten dreams. The dim lighting cast long shadows, creating an atmosphere that felt both nostalgic and eerie. Each item on the shelves seemed to whisper stories of their past, waiting for someone to listen. Sarah, a young mother with eyes that sparkled like amethyst, browsed the aisles of the thrift shop. She had always been drawn to places like this, where every object held a history, a mystery. The thrill of discovering a hidden treasure was what kept her coming back. Her laughter echoed through the musty space, a counterpoint to the hushed whispers of the past. It was a sound that brought life to the otherwise silent and still environment, a reminder that the present was just as important as the past. She pushed her daughter Lily in a stroller, the wheels humming a soft lullaby. The rhythmic sound was soothing, a gentle background to the quiet exploration of the shop. Lily's eyes were wide with curiosity, taking in the myriad of colors and shapes around her. Her husband, Mark, trailed behind, his gaze drawn to a chipped globe in the corner. He imagined the places it had been, the hands that had spun it, dreaming of far-off lands. For him, these outings were a way to connect with the world in a different time and place. He loved these Saturday outings, these glimpses into other lives. It was a shared adventure, a way to bond over the stories they imagined for the objects they found. Each item was a piece of a puzzle, a fragment of a larger narrative they created together.
Just looking.
Sarah stopped. Her eyes were drawn to a particular shelf, as if something was calling out to her. She felt a strange pull, an inexplicable urge to investigate further. Her fingers, slender and pale, reached out to touch a porcelain doll missing an eye. The doll's remaining eye seemed to stare back at her, almost as if it had a life of its own. It was both beautiful and unsettling, a relic of a bygone era. She shivered, a sudden chill despite the summer heat. It was as if the doll's gaze had pierced through her, sending a cold shiver down her spine. The contrast between the warmth outside and the cold inside the shop was stark, adding to the surreal feeling. Something felt off. A prickle of unease at the back of her neck. It was a feeling she couldn't quite shake, a sense that she was being watched. The shop, once a place of comfort, now felt like a labyrinth of shadows and secrets. She shook it off, attributing it to the shop's musty atmosphere. The air was thick with dust and memories, and she told herself that it was just her imagination playing tricks on her. After all, it was just a doll, an inanimate object. Lily, her tiny hand gripping a worn teddy bear, giggled at a plastic toy dinosaur on a shelf below. Her innocent laughter was a stark contrast to the eerie feeling Sarah had just experienced. It was a reminder of the simple joys that could be found even in the most unexpected places.
Find anything interesting?
Mark joined them, his hand finding the small of Sarah's back. His touch was warm and grounding, a reminder that she was not alone. They were in this together, exploring the unknown, his voice warm and reassuring. It was a comfort to Sarah, a beacon of light in the dimly lit shop. His presence made her feel safe, even in the midst of the strange and unsettling atmosphere.
Just looking.
She replied, her eyes scanning the shelves, searching for a hidden gem. Each item held the promise of a story, a connection to the past. She was determined to find something special, something that would make this trip worthwhile. Little did she know her search was about to end in a nightmare. The shop, with its hidden corners and forgotten relics, held secrets that were better left undiscovered. As she reached for another item, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. It was nestled between a chipped teapot and a stack of faded postcards, a candy dish. The antique shop was filled with countless treasures, each with its own story, but this dish seemed to call out to her in a way that was impossible to ignore. Not just any candy dish, this one was different. It stood out among the clutter, almost as if it had a life of its own, beckoning her closer with an invisible pull. It was a swirl of deep blues and greens, the porcelain smooth and cool beneath her touch. The colors seemed to shift and change as she moved it in the light, creating an almost hypnotic effect that drew her in even further. Tiny silver stars adorned the rim, catching the light and reflecting it in a mesmerizing dance. Each star seemed to twinkle with a life of its own, adding to the dish's otherworldly charm. The dish hummed with an energy that was both alluring and unsettling. It was as if it held a secret, something ancient and powerful, waiting to be discovered by the right person. Sarah found herself drawn to it, her fingers tracing the delicate curves. She could feel the energy pulsing beneath her fingertips, a strange warmth that seemed to seep into her very soul. A strange sense of longing washed over her, a desire to possess this object, this beautiful, captivating dish. It was as if the dish was whispering to her, promising her something she couldn't quite understand but desperately wanted.
Mark, look at this. Her voice was filled with an excitement she hadn't felt in a long time, a childlike wonder that made her eyes sparkle.
She breathed, her voice barely a whisper. The words seemed to hang in the air, filled with a sense of awe and reverence. Mark, distracted by a collection of vintage baseball cards, glanced over. He could see the intensity in her eyes, the way she was almost entranced by the dish.
It's beautiful, perfect for Halloween candy. He tried to match her enthusiasm, but there was a part of him that felt uneasy, as if the dish was more than it seemed.
He agreed, though his tone lacked her sudden fervor, already turning back to his treasure hunt. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was something off about the dish, something that made him want to keep his distance, already turning back to his treasure hunt. He tried to focus on the baseball cards, but his mind kept drifting back to the dish and the way it seemed to captivate Sarah. Sarah clutched the dish to her chest, a feeling of possessiveness washing over her. It was as if the dish had claimed her, and she couldn't bear the thought of leaving it behind. She had to have it. The thought of walking away without it was unbearable, and she knew she would regret it for the rest of her life if she didn't take it home. It felt more than just a dish. It felt like a promise, a whispered secret waiting to be unlocked. She could almost hear the faint echoes of its past, calling out to her, urging her to uncover its mystery. And in that moment she made a decision that would have terrifying consequences. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew that this dish was meant to be hers, no matter the cost. She would buy the candy dish. As she handed over the money, she felt a strange sense of satisfaction, as if she had finally found something she had been searching for her entire life. Little did she know this seemingly innocent purchase would change her life forever. The drive home was filled with an unusual silence. Sarah, normally talkative and cheerful, sat uncharacteristically quiet. She couldn't take her eyes off the candy dish, nestled protectively in her lap. Its smooth surface seemed to pulse with a faint warmth, and the silver stars glittered even in the fading daylight. A strange sense of contentment, laced with a disquieting undercurrent of unease, settled over her. At home, Sarah placed the candy dish on the coffee table, its presence immediately transforming their living room. It was as if the dish had always been there, a silent observer to their lives. Lily, initially curious about the new addition, seemed inexplicably drawn to it. She would stare at it with an intensity that was both unnerving and unsettling. As days turned into nights, Sarah noticed a change in herself. Her usually sunny disposition darkened into irritability. Her sleep was plagued by vivid, unsettling dreams. Dreams of swirling colors and whispering voices, of being trapped in an endless maze made of porcelain. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, a growing sense of dread that clung to her like a shroud. Mark watched his wife with growing concern. He had always been able to read her like an open book, but now the pages seemed to be filled with an indecipherable script. The woman he had fallen in love with, the one who had always been his rock, was slipping away from him, and he felt powerless to stop it. Sarah, his vibrant and loving wife, had become withdrawn and distant. Her once sparkling eyes now seemed clouded with an unspoken sorrow. She moved through their home like a ghost, her presence felt but not truly seen. The warmth that had once defined her was now replaced by a chilling detachment. Her laughter, once a constant melody in their home, was replaced by a strained silence. The echoes of her joy seemed to linger in the corners of the rooms, a haunting reminder of what had been lost. The silence was not just an absence of sound, but a palpable weight that pressed down on Mark's chest. She snapped at Lily for the smallest of infractions, her patience wearing thin like a threadbare tapestry. The gentle, nurturing mother had been replaced by someone Mark barely recognized. Every minor mistake was met with an outburst, and the loving home they had built together now felt like a battleground. The joy that had once radiated from her was gone, replaced by a haunted look in her eyes. It was as if she was constantly seeing something that no one else could, something that filled her with an unending dread. Mark longed to reach out and pull her back from whatever abyss she was staring into. but he didn't know how. The house, once filled with the comforting aroma of baking bread and the sound of Sarah's humming, took on a chilling stillness. The kitchen, which had always been the heart of their home, now felt like a cold, empty shell. The familiar scents and sounds were replaced by an eerie quiet that seemed to seep into every corner. Meals were eaten in silence, punctuated only by the clatter of silverware. The conversations that once flowed so easily were now stilted and forced, if they happened at all. Mark and Lily would exchange worried glances, both of them unsure of how to break through the wall that Sarah had built around herself. Lily, sensing the shift in her mother's demeanor, became increasingly clingy to Mark, her small hand always seeking his. She was too young to understand what was happening, but she could feel the tension in the air. Her innocent questions about why Mummy was so sad broke Mark's heart, and he struggled to find answers that would comfort her. The once happy home was now shrouded in an oppressive atmosphere of fear and unease. The walls seemed to close in on them, and the air was thick with unspoken worries. Mark felt like he was constantly walking on eggshells, afraid that any wrong move would shatter the fragile peace that remained. The candy dish, once a seemingly innocuous purchase, now seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, just a decorative piece that Sarah had placed on the coffee table. But now it felt like a dark presence in their home, a symbol of the discord that had taken root. It sat on the coffee table, a constant and unsettling presence. Mark couldn't explain why, but he felt drawn to it, as if it held the answers to the changes in Sarah. He would often find himself staring at it, lost in thought, trying to piece together the puzzle of their unraveling life. Mark swore he saw the silver stars flicker with an eerie light, their reflections dancing on the walls like phantoms. It was as if the dish was alive, feeding off the negative energy in their home. The flickering light would catch his eye at odd moments, sending a shiver down his spine and making him question his own sanity. He couldn't shake the feeling that the dish was somehow responsible for the drastic change in his wife, and a cold fear began to grip his heart. The logical part of his mind told him it was just a coincidence, but the growing dread in his gut told a different story. He knew he had to do something, but he didn't know where to start. The fear of losing Sarah completely was becoming unbearable, and he was willing to do anything to bring her back. Like, share and subscribe for part 2.